We have Gene Amparano from Federal Highway. He's with the Resource Center. His specialty is a safety engineer. He's been a safety engineer with the Resource Center since 2001, I believe. And prior to that, he was in New Jersey as a safety engineer with Federal Highway, and before that in Virginia with Federal Highway. He has a bachelor's degree in construction engineering and a master's in civil engineering. And he's here to give the Federal Highway perspective and the new handbook on designing for older drivers. So he will go first, and then we have Jim Danila, who's the Assistant State Traffic Engineer for Mass DOT, and he will talk briefly about what we're doing at Mass DOT to assist with older drivers and designing for older drivers. So as I said, we're trying to keep this brief in terms we have 1 hour. So if you have questions, we can try to accommodate some of them now, and the rest you'll have to ask them during lunch because everything's been compressed. So Gene.
Thank you, Bonnie. Can everybody hear me okay? Before we get started, I have a challenge for you. Look at the front page photo. Okay, you should be able to identify at least 2 countermeasures that can be an improvement for older or aging road users by the time we get done here. So if I don't forget, I'm going to come back to this photo and say, okay, of the countermeasures that we covered, can you identify 2 rooms for improvement? My assumption is that this is a photo from Massachusetts. Yes? Okay. Okay. All right.
For the record, I didn't want this on the cover. For the record.
Well, when you do this for a lot, you just look at something, it just kind of pops out at you. So, okay.
$15 billion.
Did you? Okay. Well, they're not expensive improvements, so maybe that'll help ease the pain. Okay. As Bonnie says, my name's Gene Amparano. I'm with the Federal Highway Administration. I work out of our Resource Center, where we provide technical assistance and training to state DOTs and even local and county transportation agencies when requested. Okay, so with that, we're going to be talking about the Older Driver Handbook. That's a FHWA publication. This is a 2014 edition. Okay, just real briefly, the first edition came out in '98. Okay, then it was improved upon and expanded upon and came out in 2001. And now we have the 2014 edition that came out last summer. Okay, if you notice, the title has changed. The previous 2 titles included older drivers or older pedestrians. And that was changed in 2014 to aging population. And there's a couple of reasons for that. But the primary reason is that research is showing that these countermeasures are a benefit to all road users, not just the older driver and the older pedestrian. Really is a benefit for all pedestrians and all drivers. So anything that you do here is going to help others as well. And there's no rocket science. There's nothing high level here. You'll find out a lot of it's just really common sense type stuff, and a lot of it you might already be doing. Okay, so here's the handbook. It provides information linking aging road user performance, highway design. It's broken up into 2 categories: proven practices and what we call promising practices, and we'll talk about those shortly. It does incorporate new research. There's 2 parts. The first part is just the recommendations, which basically is what I'm going to talk about. And the second part includes all of the justification and the rationale behind those countermeasures. What research has shown or demonstrates that these need to be promoted. Okay. This is meant as a guide to supplement existing design standards. The new edition has some format changes, and most importantly is that it's an electronic version. We don't have any hard copies of these. Budget cuts, they have decided that they're going to distribute this via the web. So the website is at our safety website under older users, You can go there and you can download the PDF, the HTML format version, and then print it off. The document itself is about a little more than 400 pages, 420, 430 pages, but the first part 1, is only about 93 or 95 pages. So there's a lot of pages on justification. Okay. So here is an overview of part 1. It's broken down into categories and chapters covering intersections, interchanges, roadway segments, work zones, and highway railgrade crossings. Okay, and like I said, we have those that we call proven practices, where research has shown that there's a direct benefit related to the aging road user. And then we have our promising practices, and those are the treatments that are being used by one or more agencies. And those not been fully evaluated or validated to show a direct benefit to the aging road user. It does showing promise. Okay, and got any researchers in here? So got researchers in here, and they're looking for developing a research statement. You could do one on a promising practice. Okay. So there's a total of 51 treatments. I was going to try to cover all 51, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to do that. And with the 141 total recommendations. Some treatments only have one recommendation. Some treatments have several recommendations. Okay. Here's a breakout of part 2, the rationale and supporting evidence. Again, likewise, it's broken down into chapters similar to part 1. And then the appendices has the technical notes, credits, and glossary. Okay. So chapter 2, I'm going to kind of go through this in the way it's presented in the handbook. So we're going to be talking about intersections first, which is chapter 2. Okay. If you notice in intersections, we have 16 proven practices, 8 promising practices, but we have a total of 65 and 9, or 74 recommendations, okay, out of the 141 recommendations. So the heavy end of it is in intersections because that seems to be the most problematic area for the aging road user. And also they're in numerical sequence. So when you look at a particular treatment, it has a numerical number, and they go from 1 to 51. Okay. So the first one has to deal with intersection skew angle. The recommended practice is to have intersections cross each other at 90-degree angles. Okay. And if you have restricted right-of-way where that's not possible, then you should limit the angle not less than 75 degrees from the vertical. And these are a couple of schematics. This is an indication of why. Some of the benefits and problems with benefits of not having skew angles and the problems with skew angles. You can see that with a skewed angle, it requires greater flexibility in turning, looking for oncoming traffic. And it also increases the length that pedestrians have to cross the pavement with itself. So if you put in right angles, they decrease the length, increase the visibility, and requires less neck turning to look at oncoming traffic. Okay. Intersection channelization, those are those little islands out there in the vicinity of the intersection. Raised channelization is recommended. Putting in reflective markings on curbs, and there's a slide, a couple more slides down from here, and we'll show you what that looks like. You can also put acceleration lanes where you have right turn lanes, gives the driver time to get up to speed before they have to merge into the through lane, and then also providing refuge islands for pedestrians. Okay. Offset left turn lanes is another recommendation in the handbook. 4 foot is desired if you have majority of your traffic passenger cars, but if you have a high percentage of large trucks, then 5.5 feet is desired. And really the reason for that is it provides a margin of safety for the drivers, the aging drivers, who typically don't position themselves next to the center lane. They try to stay away from opposing traffic as much as possible, which has an effect on their visibility. So You can see that by putting offset left turn lanes in, it greatly improves the line of sight, but it also requires a little bit more space. Okay, so you need some kind of a median. So what do you do if you don't have a median or if you have restricted right-of-way? Well, here's a low-cost practice that some states are using. This happens to be a photo from Arizona, where they don't have the median, but they do have a left turn lane, and the lane width at the beginning of the taper is 12 foot. So necking that down to 10 feet at the intersection, you create a 2-foot offset. And this photo was taken directly opposing from the other left turn, so you can see how much improved the line of sight is just by having that 2 feet. 4 feet is preferred or desirable, but we understand that's not always possible. But this is something that can be done if you have a left turn bay for very little expense. Delineation of curbs, okay, that's what I was talking about earlier. Putting the retroreflective markings on the curve, all you're trying to do is to make them stand out so they're more visible, so that they're less likely to be hit. Okay. Curb radius, especially in urban, suburban areas, is recommended to try to minimize the radii at these intersections to 25 to 30 feet, which is recommended. It helps reduce speeds of turning traffic, and again, it shortens that distance that requires for pedestrians to cross. If some reason 20 or 30 foot radius is not sufficient based on your design vehicle, say you need some a larger radius for larger vehicles or trucks, then there are some recommendations in there to using offsets and tapers to get a larger radius curve in there without a big, wide, sweeping right turn. Okay. Left turn traffic control. Okay, this is a biggie. Probably the most problematic issue at signals involving older drivers is the left turn maneuver. Okay, so the handbook recommends, if at all possible, put protected left turns in, meaning that the left turn traffic has their own separate phasing, their left turn indicator to make that left turn. Okay, and especially to do it where you have a history of crashes. Another thing that can be confusing, not just for older drivers, but all drivers, is lag phasing for left turns. Lag phasing, everybody know what lag phasing? Lag phasing means when you're sitting at the intersection and you get the green indicator, and if you're in the left turn lane, normally the left turn goes first, right? That's lead phasing. Lag phasing is they let the through traffic go first, and then following all the through movements, then they follow it up with the left turn movements. What that does is that kind of violates driver expectancy. So they find that lead phasing works much better than lag phasing. Now there's some times when you have to do that, but whenever you can, always try to provide lead phasing for the left turn maneuver. Okay. This is pretty much common sense. What happens as we age, you've probably seen it in the other presentations, we lose some of our capabilities, physical capabilities. Vision is one of them. So if we can make signs larger, more visible, then that's a benefit. They could be seen. Overhead, if you can place them overhead, that'd be great. I was just I'm trying to remember what state. Anyway, I was in a state, I want to say, it wasn't Michigan. I travel too much. But they had 24-inch signs at their signals. You could see them 2 blocks ahead before you got to the intersection. And, you know, while it doesn't really impact people that drive these routes routinely on a daily basis, somebody like me or the unfamiliar driver, it's a big help. Okay. Another thing is advanced street name signs. Okay, let the driver know before he gets to the intersection what intersection that is, so they gives them time to get in the appropriate lane that they need to be in to make their maneuver, whether it's a through movement or a turning movement. Turning bays, they're helpful to get that turning movement out of the through lanes. Okay. Stop and yield signs, again, larger signs. Minimum signs are 32 inches. There's a lot of states that are going to larger signs, especially at locations where there's documented increase in odor population. So not only larger, you can use higher retroreflective material to make them more visible, and certainly have some kind of a maintenance program that monitors the visibility or the retroreflectivity of their signs and change them out when they need to be. And then advanced notice signs, stop signs. Okay, if you have an intersection that's blocked by either a horizontal or vertical curve, it can't be seen, you don't have sufficient stopping sight distance, then place a sign, symbol sign out there giving the driver advance notice ahead of the time, so they're not surprised when they pop around that curve or up over the hill. Recommended is to provide it at least 2.5 seconds preview distance in advance of the intersection based on the operating speed of the vehicles. Okay. Lane control signs. I'm a big believer in lane control signs because since I travel a lot, I get into some intersections. I like them overhead because usually wherever I'm at, there's cars sitting on them and I can't see what they're telling me. So if they're overhead, I can see and I know what lane I need to be in. Advanced sign markings. If it's a complex intersection, you could put these lane control signs ahead of the intersection like this example shows. Okay, the recommendation for these is to place them at 5 seconds preview distance based on the operating speed. Okay. Traffic signals, this is treatment number 13. These are some things that we can do to make them more visible. Okay. Use 12-inch signal lenses rather than the 8-inch signals. They're 4 times the intensity level of the larger signals, and this is typically not a problem in newer areas, but if you get into some of the older communities, like New York, we saw a lot of 8-inch signal heads up there. I don't know, I haven't really been through your urban area sufficient enough to say how many 8-inch signals that you have. But they seem to be more prevalent in older cities that have been around a while and they have put up their signals maybe 20 or 30 years ago. Okay. So we find a lot of states that part of their program is to update their signal heads. Backplates is another thing that can be done to enhance the visibility of signal heads. Usually they're a black plate, but what we can do now is we can put a border around the backplate. It's anywhere from 1 inch to 3 inches wide, a yellow retroreflective border around the backplate, the edge of the backplate, improves the visibility of the signal, especially at nighttime. It's not as dramatic during the daytime, but at nighttime it really increases the visibility of the signal. Lighting is a benefit as well. It's helpful for the drivers and the pedestrians. And regular maintenance of the lighting is also important. Okay, pedestrian crossings. Use a walking speed of 3 feet per second to calculate the crossing time for pedestrians. Okay. Typically that used to be 4 feet per second, and that was based on a much younger pedestrian, and research shows that the walking speed for older pedestrians can be as low as 2 or 2.5 feet per second. Okay. And when you do the calculation for the crossing distance for time based on that recommended walking speed, then there's a change in this handbook from the other handbook is to lengthen that distance 6 feet. Okay, so measure your crossing distance measured 6 feet back from the curb or the edge of the travel lane. Okay. As a result of that, there was a change in the leading pedestrian interval equation. What the leading pedestrian interval does is give the pedestrian a little bit more time before releasing traffic to establish their presence in the crosswalk. Okay. Now, I find that works well in some places and it doesn't work so well in other places. It depends on the drivers. Do the drivers yield to the pedestrians? So some locales are more pedestrian friendly than others. So if you have pretty good compliance with your drivers yielding to pedestrians, this works very well. If you don't, then I've been to some places where older drivers are terrified. They won't, even if they have extra time to cross, they won't do it. They won't go out in the intersection or in the crosswalk until they're sure that they're not going to get hit. But anyway, this equation was adjusted based on the 6 was added to account for that extra distance there, and then the 3 is the walking speed. And then the third bullet there is promotes the use of pedestrian countdown signals, which is pretty common now. Okay, matter of fact, some cities have started pretty significant programs just to do that, to install these pedestrian countdown signals. Roundabouts, is Massachusetts a roundabout friendly state? Not the circles, right? Roundabouts, modern roundabouts, not the traffic circles. New Jersey, I was in New Jersey and I shouldn't say we, they have the old traffic circles down there and they operate a little bit differently than roundabout. But they do have a very valuable benefit. When you have a roundabout and a conventional 4-leg intersection, in a conventional 4-leg intersection, there's 32 conflict points, which are a lot. So if you can minimize those conflict points, you're going to have an impact on safety. Roundabout only has 8. A single lane roundabout has only 8 conflict points. So you're reducing conflict points by 75%. Okay. Preferences for a single lane over a multi-lane, if possible. Place your pedestrian crossing setback 25 feet from your yield lines. Use raised splitter islands over just pavement markings. And there's some enhanced signing that's in the new guide that wasn't in the previous guide. Okay. Right turn channelization. This is meant to, are we in promising practices? Yeah, now we're in promising practices. Those other ones that we talked about, those first 16 are proven practices where there's validated research that shows there's a direct benefit if you use those countermeasures to older drivers and pedestrians. And now we're in the promising practices for intersections. Okay. Right turn channelization, again using the tighter radii helps reduce the speed, approach speed, and improves the line of sight for turning drivers. And you can see that in this schematic. Signal head visibility, 1 signal head per lane, centered over each lane. Okay, if you can see it, chances are you're going to be able to control your driving effort. Like I said, a lot of these recommendations are not rocket science. They're pretty much common sense stuff. High visibility crosswalks at intersections, and those would be like the ladder type or the diagonal type markings rather than just the straight ladder, the rails on the side without the in-between hash marks. So is this a benefit for the pedestrian or is this a benefit for the driver? What's the intention behind this? recommendation? To make them more visible to who? Driver, right, because, well, driver, it greatly, it's about a magnitude of 10 that you're going to increase the visibility of the crosswalk to the driver. And I had a slide in here that shows that, but I had to, I took it out because I told I only have so much time. Maybe I should have left it in there. Okay. Putting in intersections that either reduce or eliminate left turns, okay? And this is a restricted crossing U-turn movement that's more or less meant for a expressway type facility. It can be done in urban areas where you're just taking the side road. If they want to make a left turn or a through movement, you redirect them downstream and provide a U-turn either through the median or at the next intersection to have them come back and make a right turn to go through or proceed through for the through movement, for the left turn movement. Okay. And these can be done pretty cost effectively if you already have an intersection there. And the U-turn, we get questioned a lot about that. Is it more dangerous or a higher risk making a U-turn and a through movement or a left turn? And research says no. Okay, because they find, the research shows us that the majority of the intersection crashes occur at the far end of the intersection rather than the near end. So you're taking that component, that part of it out of out of the risk management part of it. Okay. Pedestrian treatments at intersection. This is a promising practice. It's a push button activated extension for crossing. Okay, it's activated by the pedestrian. Okay, the first one, A, and what that does is that if the pedestrian pushes and holds that in for 2 seconds or longer, then an extended crossing time is called up through the controller. Okay, and that's preset by the transportation agency. They could call up an additional 5 seconds or additional 10 seconds, whatever they deem appropriate. And then the second one, they call it a passive pedestrian detection system. Really, what that is, it has a sensors that's focused on the crosswalk or the crossing area, and it'll pick up pedestrians in the crosswalk and then extend the crossing phase without requiring direct activation by the pedestrian themselves. Okay. Flashing yellow arrow. This is one of my favorite. I don't know, maybe you disagree. But research shows that where we had the flashing yellow arrow, that older drivers responded more appropriately, more correctly when making a left turn movement over just having a green ball. Okay. When you have a green ball, sometimes that's misinterpreted as you've got to go, you can go. Okay, and I've done it too. I've had the green ball and a left turn. I just see it and I make a left turn, and then I get the universal friendly sign. You know what that is, and a lot of honking. But when I see the flashing yellow arrow, I know that this is telling me not to cross until it's clear. Okay. Interchanges. Don't forget our picture. Okay, there's 6 proven practices in interchanges. Okay, so we're moving on to chapter 3, and there's 2 promising practices. And these are the recommendations. Okay, first one has to do with signing. Okay, use letters height per 30 feet of legibility distance. Okay, that converts to about an 18-inch letter at a 65-mile-an-hour speed. Use mixed case font. Okay, so have caps for the beginning, followed by lowercase letters for destination and street names. Arrowhead per lane. Okay, for multi-lane exits with option lanes. Okay, this is one that's generated a lot of discussion. Okay, because if you use an arrow per lane, the concern is that it increases your sign size, that increases your wind loading, that increases, concern whether your mast arms or your supporting system for your sign needs to be redesigned. So there are some legitimate concerns. Okay, so this is the recommended practice. Okay, here's a photo of the optional diagrammatic sign with the optional arrow per lane. Okay, this is what was typically used and we typically see in the current designs. Hint, hint. So research shows that when you have arrow per lane and shows the separate traffic moves, there's about a 28% increase in not safety, comprehension of the interchange for the driver. Okay. Exit ramps and entrance ramps. Okay, and this is more for entrance ramp geometry, is to use what they call the parallel design versus the taper design. Okay, what that does is that gives you kind of a merge lane so that you can get up, number one, you can get up to speed with oncoming traffic, and it gives you time to search for a gap to make your merge. Whereas in the taper design, you have a much smaller footprint to make that maneuver in. So the recommendation is to use the parallel design when possible. Okay, interchange lighting. Use interchange lighting is highly recommended. Okay, complete interchange lighting and is preferred. If for some reason you can't do complete interchange lighting, then you can do partial interchange lighting, and basically that would consist of 2 high mast installations. One would be located near the exit gore area, and then the other midway through the controlling curvature of the ramps. Right. Wrong way driving. You guys have a lot of wrong way driving here. Okay, it's pretty common across the country. California had a lot of wrong way driving maneuvers, and they've done a lot of research on this since 1963 or 1964. So, and they've come up with some good practices, and basically some of those practices have been adopted into the manual. It consists of improving lighting, improving signs, improving markings. There's a website that you can go and look at that in this particular publication from ATSA. Okay. You could also consider conducting a road safety audit at an interchange. There's a prompt list that's provided in this document. There's resources available that can help walk you through the steps of doing a road safety audit at an interchange if you're experiencing higher than expected crashes. Okay. Roadway segments. There's 4 proven practices. Okay, notice how the treatments are in numerical sequential order. 33 through 42. Okay, 4 of those are proven practices with 12 recommendations. 6 of those are promising practices with 6 recommendations. Okay. Horizontal curves. I used to have I have a slide with a nice, pretty horizontal curve picture, but it has too much text on it, and I'd have to have another slide to cover the other stuff. So I dropped it out. Thanks, Bonnie. Anyway, the recommendation for horizontal curves is to have good delineation, okay, through the curve. Those are your edge lines. Use raised pavement markers if possible. That can be problematic for the northern states that have significant snow. Okay, so there's, they've got the recessed pavement markings, and then they've got a new thing that I'll talk about shortly that you might want to try. Okay, use post-mounted delineators in addition to chevron signs. Okay, everybody know what the chevron signs are around the horizontal curve. Okay, those help identify the controlling features of the curve. And you can also increase the pavement width through horizontal curve, and that's works well on rural 2-lane roads. Okay, give the driver a little bit more space to make his maneuver. Okay, vertical curves and the design of vertical curves. Recommendation is to stick to the 2.5 second perception reaction time. That's PRT, perception for the design of vertical curves. Okay, in the AASHTO Green Book, that's the Bible for designing road segments. It's just a recommendation to use 2.5 seconds. It doesn't say you have to. So the handbook kind of reinforces, okay, you should be using at least 2.5 seconds. Okay, take another look at your picture. Contrast pavement markings should be used wherever the pavement color is light to increase the visibility of the pavement markings, so improve delineation. Okay, and so anything that we can do to improve where our lanes are and the boundaries of our lane and the boundaries of our roadway is going to have an impact on safety. Okay. And here's some examples of using highly retroreflective marking materials. Okay, in the photo on the left, we have 2 different systems. They were both stripes that were both placed at the same time. The one on the left is just standard paint on pavement. The other one is paint on a rumble strip, and it's called a rumble stripe after you paint it. Okay, so you can see the enhanced visibility of doing that. The one on the right is reflective inlaid tape, where you go and you grind out a length for the tape, and then you lay it in there. It's recessed. Okay. Road diets. Okay. This works well for roads that have ADTs anywhere below 20,000 ADT vehicles per day. It works very well on ADTs of 15,000 or less. Okay, it kind of controls traffic through the roadway. It has a tendency to slow down the traffic and speeds, and it also allocates extra space for other road users, such as bicyclists, pedestrians, and even parking. Okay. High friction surface treatments is something that's being implemented different agencies. They're used on horizontal and vertical curves, and in advance of intersections and off ramps. Our state uses them a lot on bridge decks. It helps increase braking and expedites reduction of vehicle speed and control. Yep. Construction work zones, this will go quick because they're pretty generic recommendations. 5 proven practices, 24 recommendations, 2 promising practices with 2 recommendations. And basically, in work zones, it has to do with giving the driver the information they need to get through there. AARP did a study, a survey, and they evaluated or surveyed, I don't know if it's 1,300 or 1,400 older drivers, and the majority of them said they had problems getting through work zones. Okay. Use of advanced lane control signs. Okay, that advanced notice, fluorescent orange sign. That's okay. Make them brighter, make them more visible. Portable, changeable message signs. Okay, there's some guidance in there on how you should use that. The problem is that a lot of times we try to give them too much information, and they really can't absorb it all. So there's some recommendations on how much units of information you should give them. Limit it to 2 phasing, preferably 1 phasing. so you don't give them information overload. And number 45 is path guidance or channelization devices. Okay, those are your cones, your barricades, your markers, your deflectors. Gives you recommendations on the spacing for those. As far as cones and barricades, they say use the larger traffic control devices so they're more visible because they have a minimum size and they have a maximum size. So shoot for the bigger stuff so they're more visible. Increase letter height for temporary work zone signs. This here for action words. Use 8-inch letters. Try to grab their attention. Okay. Work zone safety audits. Here's that survey I was talking about. Work zone safety audits can be performed if you're having crash problems in work zones. Here's the survey I was talking about, 1,329 members. 21% indicated, I thought it was higher than that, 31% indicated they had problems navigating through work zones. You ever go through a work zone at night and the barricades are kind of like, looks like they're coming in at you? My wife freaks out whenever that happens. But if they're done correctly, then it does enhance safety for all road users. This work zone road safety audit publication is available on the website, and there's a prompt list that gives information on how to do that. You can go there and get it. Okay, our last and final thing we're going to talk about, highway road grade crossings. There's two proven practices and no promising practices. Okay, and the first practice is to use delineators. Okay, from your crossbuck signs, advance notice crossbuck signs on the right side of the road to the one on the opposite end, spaced about 50 feet apart. And these are for passive control devices where you don't have the rail grade crossings where you don't have the arms that come down and the signals and everything else. And then the final treatment is providing lighting at the grade crossing. You align the luminaire. It's kind of hard to tell it in this photo, but you align the luminaire so that it's facing the train. That's what you want to do. You want to make the train more visible, not the roadway. Okay. This here just says that the handbook is just is a guide. It's not a requirement. It's not a mandate. Surprisingly, when we have a companion workshop that goes with this that we deliver, it's a one-day workshop, and we've had a lot of people come up and say, why don't you make these recommendations mandatory? I don't think that would be well received. So that's why they're a supplement to existing guidelines. Let the users and the agencies decide which of these are most appropriate for them. Okay, and that's it. Oh.
So let's
Back to my picture.
let's save the questions until afterwards. So during lunch, go grab them. On the way to lunch, grab them. But let's hear from Jim a little bit. Jim Danila.
I don't have a presentation, so I'll just sit here. Can everyone hear me okay? So much like what Gene was saying, a lot of the policies and design standards that we come up with aren't always specifically targeted at one group of people. So a lot of things I'm talking about are projects that we're doing to try to improve the safety for all users, but in turn, they end up having a great deal of value for some of the older drivers. So I'll just go through some of the policy changes that we've had over the past few years and highlight a couple of projects that we've done. And I encourage you, if you do have questions, feel free to come up and ask Bonnie afterwards, and she'll answer. I'm just kidding. You can come up and you can ask me. One of the biggest things we've been doing the last few years at Mass DOT is the road safety audits. Gene talked a little about this. We do both work zone road safety audits, which we've done a handful of, and regular road safety audits. We seem to be doing about one per week now at this point. So we'll probably easily exceed 60 in 2015. I mean, that's how focused we are on safety at Mass DOT. It is very important for us when we get into projects where we have a known safety problem to get the people out for the road safety audits, to go through all that and to incorporate what we learn from that into the design. So one of the bigger policy changes that we've been working on over the past year is to incorporate wet reflective pavement markings on all of our freeway facilities. Wet reflective pavement markings are, it's a particular element that goes into the pavement marking material that makes it appear brighter at night and especially in wet conditions. I know many of you who from in this room are in Massachusetts. At night and in rain, you probably have a hard time seeing what the pavement markings look like. This is especially the case if you have, if your eyesight isn't as good as it once was. So this is something we've definitely been focusing on. I know Gene talked a little bit about, using raised pavement markers to supplement, to assist in that. Massachusetts does not have a very good record with using raised pavement markers. We've actually been prohibited from using them since 2004. We've been using slotted in pavement markers since then, but those don't have a great performance either. So we have a research project going on right now with UMass Lowell to kind of test, how we can get the slotted pavement markers to work better. But I think in the long run, having the wet reflective pavement markings out on our roads is going to be the answer to having really good retroreflective markings at night. So we first started doing that in about 2014. Starting this year, that we're putting wet reflective pavement markings into all of our interstate projects. Another one that Gene mentioned was the contrast markings on bridge decks. We tried that out for the first time this past year using a contrast tape on a concrete bridge deck. It came out great. We had very positive response to it. And we're looking now into making that our standard going forward, that on all of our concrete bridge decks we'll be using a contrast pavement marking. More pavement marking things at some of our more complicated interchanges where you have left exits or where you have major interstate to interstate movements. We'll be putting in the interstate route shields on the pavement in advance, so that people will know, and that will assist with the guidance, so you know which lane you want to be in if you want to, for instance, stay on I-90 or to get onto I-93, something like that. We have been doing mixed case lettering on our signs, on our street name signs for a while now. This year we've adopted on our secondary state highways mixed case lettering on what's called our D6 and D8 signs. These are our directional signs used at intersections. So again, mixed case lettering, that's something that's going to be helping out legibility for all the drivers. We've been adopting a number of new work zone policy standards. Some of these really have to do with emphasizing pedestrian and bike safety, but pedestrian safety is always a big one. Gene talked about navigating through the work zone. It's important to do that for the driver, but it's also important to do that for the pedestrian, because part of what we want to talk about today is not necessarily just the drivers, but keeping transportation options open for everyone. So we want to make sure that whenever we have a work zone out there, that we aren't limiting pedestrian access through that as well, and having clearly defined spaces for people who might be sight impaired, who might need assistance getting through. I mean, these are all policies that we've adopted. Because of a lot of the work that my boss has done on the national committee, Massachusetts remains one of the leaders in the country on having up-to-date work zone policies. We have partnered with Federal Highway on a number of everyday counts initiatives. One of them being the high friction surface treatment, which Gene had mentioned. We have put that out on one project so far where we'll be putting high friction surface treatment at 3 locations out in District 3. We'll be doing this at a number of other districts in the upcoming years. We believe this is a really positive safety benefit that can be done at a relatively low cost to kind of reduce the number of lane departure crashes that we have. This year's Everyday Counts program that I've been involved in, and that Lou Rubito here has been involved in, is the Road Diet program. Again, I think the end goal of that is for us to come up with a guideline for use of road diets for MassDOT that cities and towns may want to adopt as well. So that's something that we hope to have come out in the next year or so. A number of the traffic signal items that Gina talked about are policies that we've either adopted or are in the process of adopting. And I can go through them real quick. We've been using the 12-inch signal lenses since at least 2003, if not earlier than that. We've been using countdown pedestrian signals consistently for the past 6+ years. We've had an accessible pedestrian push button policy in place since 2012. It's our recommended practice, although we can't get it in every case, that we do use one signal per lane overhead in all conditions, so we try to do that on all of our projects. And then the big one is the flashing yellow arrow, which we've adopted as our standard now for protected permissive left turns. So you'll start to see flashing arrow pop up in a lot of different places. Really starting this year, we actually put a project out that advertised at the end of last year that construction has started on, where we're going to be retrofitting about 270 intersections on the state highway system to flashing yellow arrow, and that will get the majority of our locations into flashing yellow arrow. There'll be another 20 or so that get advertised this year, and then there's another 50 or so that will get advertised in future years. But we really, really like the flashing arrow. We understand its safety benefits. We have it out at 2 state highway locations right now, one in Lenox, where it has significantly decreased the number of left turn crashes, and another in Littleton that just went operational in the past 6 months or so. So that's a project we spent a lot of time and effort on. We spent a lot of time talking to the local DOTs on, and to MPOs, and it's something that we really want to push and make sure that not just the state highway system, but the local roads adopt it as well. Other projects that we've been doing, we're in the midst of a sign inventory program, which is inventorying every single sign on state highway throughout Massachusetts, and every sign that's on a state numbered route that may not necessarily be state highway. And part of the sign inventory project is so that they'll be taking the condition of the existing signs that are out there. So we'll know if they'll actually do a reflectivity test on it. So we'll know if they'll have to be replaced, if they're faded, or if they're not, so we can kind of get an idea of, all right, we know how old it is, we know it's going to have to be replaced X years from now, so we can plan ahead, so we can have scheduled replacement for those types of things. Get into that. My partner here is making sure I don't forget anything. We completed a project a few years ago doing stop-controlled, finding the high crash stop-controlled intersections on locally owned roads. We identified about 240 locations that were involved in the project, and we did a lot of things that Gene talked about that will be helpful, like increasing the size of the signs, doubling up the stop signs on both the left and right side of the road, using stop ahead signs, using intersection ahead warning signs that have the street name plaque below it. So these are all, that was a project that was completely on local roads, so we wanted to, in addition, again, to doing just state highway locations, but we're really trying to get the locals involved as well. We're in the midst of a curve warning program where on local roads where we'll be assisting municipalities who volunteered to be part of the program to add advanced warning signs and chevrons through the curve on some of their high crash curves. This is kind of an interesting project where we have a consultant doing a lot of the engineering work for us, but the Mass DOT signs staff will be fabricating the signs and providing those materials for the cities and towns to install. So it's kind of a little bit of a different way of doing a project that's been a bit innovative for us. And finally, what I was being reminded about is our wrong way driver program. This is another very large project. Construction started on it last year. It's targeting 432 locations across the state that are susceptible to wrong way entries onto our limited access facilities. We've completed our work in the western half of the state through basically through Worcester County last year. Started back up early this spring, completed the Cape, and are now working from the south coast and heading north. A lot of the work that we're doing at these intersections are based on where it was hard to target, just a couple interchanges because we don't know where some of the wrong way drivers entries are occurring. So our decision was we're going to make these sign packages our standard, and we're going to do it at all of our locations that are susceptible. So that's why there's so many locations that are being done. We know from the research that older drivers and impaired drivers tend to have a lower kind of cone of vision when they're driving. So their eyes tend to be lower to the road. They're not necessarily looking for a sign that might be mounted 7 feet up in the air. So the thing you'll notice is at these interchanges, we'll have signs that have a much lower sign mounting height, maybe just, I think it's just 36 or 24 inches off the road, doubling up wrong way and do not enter signs on both sides of the road. Adding positive guidance where it's needed, so that you're trying to guide the driver into the correct on-ramp instead of onto the off-ramp. So that project will finish up this October, and we'll hopefully have some good crash statistics that we can kind of evaluate in the upcoming years following that. And finally, one of the things that we're always trying to do is do some local outreach. We do a lot of work with Bay State Roads. We do a lot of work with the MPOs. So we're always here to try to assist, because MassDOT, we are the largest roadway owner. We do own the most traffic signals, but we don't own the majority. The majority of the roads are owned by the cities and towns. So we're here for assistance, and we want to make our roads safer. Thank you.
So we actually have 4 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions for Gene or Jim, feel free. Yes.
Question for Gene. With the advent of LED lights being used on a lot of traffic signals, we found, especially this last winter, the downside is that the LED lights emit no heat, so it's not melting snow on the face of the lights. Is anything being done about that?
The question is, anything being done about LED lights? The fact that they don't emit heat, if you have snow, then it can gather on the signal head and block its visibility. I just saw something on that recently. When I say recently, I mean the last couple of months. I think they're just now becoming aware of the problem. I don't know of any specific studies underway, but I'm sure that it's being looked at. We have a research department that I can check with to see if there's any efforts that's going on down there. If you want me to, if you give me your information, I'll check on it and let you know.
Quick question. As a pedestrian, I really like the up-down signals. In my jurisdiction, what I find, though, is they're not consistent in the same city. So some of them, you hit 0, that's 0. Traffic goes, you know it. Then there's some that hit 0, and you rush, and then you find after a couple miles, especially when you're used to it, you're like, I've got another 5 seconds. So then you start wondering, well, when they hit 0, do I have 5 seconds, or is the traffic going? It seems to me being consistent, I personally would like 0 median traffic. That way I know exactly where I need to get off. Is there any guidance? Because I would imagine some older folks would be like, well, yeah, I'm trying to get through this, but once they realize that there's a difference, they may try to work consistent. Is there any?
I mean, the MUTCD provides guidance on the minimum amount of time you need between the end of when it hits 0 and when either the vehicle phase can end if you're having concurrent pedestrians, or when the vehicle phase can start if you have an exclusive pedestrian where all the vehicles have red. So that's in there. And at MassDOT, we've reinforced that by putting out, we have a policy on our guidance on calculating signal for clearance times for both vehicles and pedestrians. So we added on to that to kind of give real clear guidance to designers and to traffic signal owners to know what to do.
Yeah, there is recommendations on how to do that, and it just depends on how much clearance time you want to provide. But I've seen some, like you said, some states, as soon as it turns 0, then it releases traffic. The problem with that is then drivers have a tendency to use that as a countdown to go. As 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, then they can go. So there is some recommendations for allowing for some additional time, some clearance times, so that doesn't happen.
Either way, I just find that it's inconsistent even within the same city, so you're always.
Yeah.
I was going to say even within the cities. Within the cities.
Not the exact same.
I mean, part of the problem with that is that it's not a standard; it's guidance, and it gives you
Right.
different options.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
I have a question in regards to the handbook for designing roadways. I see a lot of things on accessible pedestrian signals and potential warning placements in regards to that's a part of designing for an aging population. You didn't seem
The handbook doesn't, it references other publications that provide all that information, because that information is available. I don't know exactly what it is, what the requirements are, but I know that that information is out there and available, and if you want me to get it for you, I can.
Well, no, I just think it should be somewhere acknowledged in there, and don't forget about
Okay.
accessible pedestrian signals, because you're designing roadways for aging population, and that component is totally left out of it. Even though it's incorporated in other things, you're also highlighting what is in other booklets as well.
Okay, so you're talking about location of ped buttons and stuff like that?
Well, no, the accessible pedestrian signals should be a part of including access to the intersection for pedestrians. Could be a term, but it's not in there, neither in your, as I recall from your display for the intersection, because some of them are really good about the smalling of the radiuses, which
Mhm.
is great. But in your curb cut, you didn't have accessible, you didn't have detectable warnings in the curb.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
So that should be incorporated in, because people see that and then they forget about the other part of it. Even though it's stated somewhere else, it's really nice that you're focusing on this group, that should be incorporated within what you're talking about, a sentence. It doesn't have to be a description, but it has to be, it should be included in.
Okay, I'll see what I can find on that and try to improve it. Thanks.
I know there's a few more questions. I'm sorry, we've run out of time.